A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
Star Wars, Starlight, Go Together, Part 1, by Charles Soule, December 2020. A short story set in the High Republic. Originally published in the Star Wars Insider, issue 199. Reprinted in the High Republic Starlight Stories Compendium. Created and read by the Archivist Publishing. The following story takes place before the events depicted in Star Wars: The High Republic, Light of the Jedi. On board the Starlight Beacon, somewhere in the Outer Rim, Adren lifted a pile of dirty, grease-stained clothes from the floor. He considered, then balled them up and shoved them in the sack he was using as luggage, atop the clean clothes he'd already thrown in. He glanced around the bedroom. Nothing else was needed. He always traveled light when working.
All packed,
he said, throwing the sack on the bed next to several small cases holding his wife's clothes and assorted sundries, which she had packed hours earlier. And he would bet 100 credits there wasn't even a dirty sock anywhere in them.
You ready?
Joss asked her, calling into the tiny living room that formed the rest of their personal space aboard the Starlight Beacon. It was gorgeously designed. Everything on the station was, but space, in space, would always be at a premium.
Maybe we can get something to eat before we get out of here,
he added. The canteens on Starlight Beacon were excellent, serving dishes from all over the Outer Rim to showcase the cultures that comprised this far-off edge of the Republic. This principle carried through the whole station. Its structure used metallic ores from many different worlds and housed craftspeople, contractors, and staff from planets throughout the Outer Rim territories. Starlight Beacon was a wonder. Joss had never seen anything like it, and his career had taken him across half the galaxy. He and Pikka were project managers, specialists in bringing large-scale construction jobs to completion. They worked out last-minute bugs in the code, silenced rattling pipes, and dealt with coolant leaks. They'd spent the last few months getting Starlight Beacon ready for its formal dedication. But now the last bolt had been bolted and the last weld had been welded. Even the biological reserves were fully stocked. They felt lonely without the tourists expected to come for a glimpse of the biodiversity of worlds like Mon Cala and Felucia. But they were gorgeous and lush all the same, even the desert biomes. Starlight Beacon was, at last, complete, and Joss and Pikka Adren had played a big part in making that happen. Reason enough to be proud. Joss didn't consider himself overly emotional, but this was a special place, emblematic of all the Galactic Republic could and should be. But just then, Joss couldn't wait to get the hell off the thing. His wife had planned a vacation for them both with a surprise destination. Knowing Pikka, it would be somewhere spectacular. They had to catch the next ship heading back to Coruscant, and Pikka had made it very clear they couldn't be late. So it was extremely unclear why, now that Joss was finally packed and ready, she was completely absorbed in the datapad she was holding, tapping away at its keys, her face screwed up in the focused way he liked it very much. He was crazy about this woman. It was mostly her mind. She saw the galaxy in a way he didn't, which meant she constantly surprised and delighted him, but he loved her small, but not delicate body too, and her weird curly hair. Pikka was just home. No matter where they were, she was home.
Didn't you tell me that under no circumstances could I make us late?
Joss said.
Dear.
Pikka responded, not looking up from the datapad.
Hey, what are you reading there?
He asked.
A steamy Zeltron novel.
I wish,
she said. She lifted the datapad. It displayed energy usage across the entirety of Starlight Beacon, power ebbing and flowing along thousands of kilometers of wires and conduits. A web of light in the rough shape of the station, a gigantic central sphere with tower-like extensions at either pole.
Okay,
Joss said, not understanding.
Look,
Pikka said, and pointed at a single, tiny point of data.
That's too high.
Joss squinted at the datapad. He said,
Yeah, not by much, though.
Not by much, but by some. And a minute ago it was 0.5% less.
Joss knew what his wife was thinking. They'd been hired to optimize Starlight Beacon. Whilst they had done that job, and this little tiny power surge was barely even noticeable, his brilliant wife had noticed it. And now he had too. He sighed.
Let's go figure it out.
She grinned. Pikka headed for the door, clearly expecting Joss to follow. The idea that they might be late for their transportation back to the core and the subsequent vacation apparently gone from her mind. Joss sighed again. His wife did love a puzzle. I love puzzles, Pikka thought, moving purposefully along a corridor, her attention mostly on the datapad in her hand, though she had that sense of Joss following not too far behind. She always knew when her husband was near. Either she felt good, warm and strong, or she didn't. It was that simple. It could also just be that he made a lot of noise. Joss was not a small man. It wouldn't surprise her to learn that one of his parents was a reek. She turned a corner and almost collided with Shai Tennem, arguably the last person on the station she would want to see at a time like this. Shai was a Bith, a particular Bith, charged with overseeing Starlight Beacon's construction by the Chancellor of the Republic, Lena Soule herself. He was legendary, or maybe notorious, for his incredibly exacting standards. He would find an energy transfer abnormality quite vexing, no matter how insignificant. Even worse, Shai Tennem was not alone. He was leading what looked like a tour group. Suddenly, it snapped together in Pikka's mind. Yes, Joss had mentioned this. A number of Republic dignitaries had come to see the finished station a few weeks before it became fully online and operational. She recognized Admiral Kronara, a high-ranking officer in the Republic Defense Coalition. As for the others, amazingly, they were Jedi. In robes of white and gold, with filigree shapes embossed here and there, and holstered lightsabers at their hips or slung across their torsos, they walked purposefully towards her. A tall human woman with blonde hair walked alongside a dark-haired man with caramel skin, also a curved-skulled, wide-eyed Ithorian, and a female Duros. Finally, another human, hair in long, beautiful gray braids, walked alongside a tall, golden-furred Wookiee. Pikka didn't even know that there were any Wookiee Jedi. Behind closed doors, Joss called them space wizards. Jedi had strange powers and abilities, and Pikka imagined they could probably use that magic to do a lot of harm. If they wanted to, of course. In her experience, powerful people used their power only to advance their own interests. But not the Jedi Order. They were good people. Incredibly, unassailably good and dedicated to helping people.
Ah, Mrs. Adren.
Shai said, in his peculiar, clipped and reedy voice.
Lovely to see you. I'm just showing the Republic emissaries around the station.
Tennem turned to face the Jedi.
My friends, meet Pikka and Joss Adren. They were instrumental in ensuring Starlight Beacon's on-time, error-free construction.
Pleased to meet you.
Joss said. He even gave a little wave. What is he thinking? He is delaying us, Pikka thought, the datapad in her hand feeling hot.
Likewise,
said the blonde Jedi, smiling.
thank you for your work. This place is incredible.
Why don't you join us?
Shai said to Joss.
I'm sure you can offer many insights regarding Starlight Beacon systems, which our guests would find very interesting.
Pikka chanced to glance at her datapad. That small bump in power usage she'd noticed earlier was on its way to becoming a surge. She gritted her teeth and noticed that the Wookiee Jedi was looking at her. He cocked his head as he watched her. Is he reading my mind? She thought. Is that even possible?
Joss, we should probably go.
Pikka said, hoping Joss could read her mind too.
We don't want to be late.
He threw her a quick glance, eyebrows raising as he seemed to remember the urgency of their task.
That's right.
Joss said, turning to the Admiral.
Actually, we're hitching a ride with you all when you go.
Kronara acknowledged this with a tight nod.
We're on our way to the hangar now. Joss, was it? I'd get down there soon, or we may have to leave without you.
Shai Tennem spoke up.
That's perfect. Come along with us, you two. Porter droids can bring your things from your quarters directly to the ship.
Pikka's heart rate spiked. She would have to explain the situation right in front of Shai, wouldn't she? In front of these important people, she would have to embarrass herself, as well as the station administrator. Even worse, this power surge issue could actually develop into a real problem. They needed to leave now, to learn whether this power issue was more than just a glitch. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the Wookiee turn to the gray-haired Jedi and murmur quietly in its own language. The woman raised a hand.
Actually, Administrator Tennem,
The gray-haired Jedi said.
shouldn't the Adrens enjoy their last moments on the station before they depart? It sounds like they've already done their share for Starlight Beacon.
Shai nodded deferentially.
As you say, Master Azsec.
He said, turning away from the Adrens.
Right.
Pikka said, pulling at Joss's arm.
Nice to meet all of you.
The Jedi parted as they passed. Pikka thought she felt her skin tingle as she walked by the Wookiee. Probably just her imagination. They turned a corner, and she quickly showed Joss the datapad.
It's getting worse.
She said, her voice quiet. Joss checked the status of the glitch. Then he frowned as he realized the severity of their situation.
This way.
He said, and set off briskly down the corridor. Joss kept maps in his head, one reason he was so good at his job. He studied worksites until he had the systems and subsystems memorized, in the same way surgeons knew about the bodies of their patients. Starlight Beacon was no exception. Ever since Pikka showed him the anomalous power reading, his brain had churned through that mental map. He was zeroing in on it, seeing the station in his head, and it brought him here. Conduit 398GX14, situated behind an access panel near the entrance to Starlight's Jedi Temple.
It just jumped up another 20%.
Pikka said, "This issue wasn't quite at evacuate the station level yet, but if it kept building, it would be." He levered off the casing to Conduit 398GX14, dropped to one knee and peered inside, catching a whiff of hot, overstressed metal. He pushed aside a few bundles of wiring and immediately saw the problem. A meter along the conduit, a resistor hub had burned out. It was acting like a dam within the power distributors, not letting energy flow past. Instead, it was just collecting it and boosting it. Joss had seen this before. Probably a poorly seated wire. Whether originally a mistake by an assembly droid or a technician, one tiny error had created a feedback loop, which was constantly cycling, building, and accelerating. Even worse, this particular conduit was an offshoot that led directly to the main reactor system, which meant,
We have to fix this now.
Joss said, matter of fact.
It'll short out the whole damn station.
Can we cut power to this section?
Pikka asked.
And by some time?
By some time, you say? Well, we don't have authorization now that our contract's up, and we've only got about 30 seconds before the surge overwhelms the resistor hub. But I can fix this. I know a trick. I can create a temporary circuit to dissipate the energy. We'll be okay.
Joss pulled out one of the spanners he kept in his work suit pretty much all the time. He learned long ago that you never knew when you'd need a spanner. He reached into the conduit and stopped. He flexed his fingers, tried elongating his hand. Tried. Joss' arms were as big as the rest of him. Good for construction work, good for all kinds of work. Many old scars on his knuckles could speak to that. Unfortunately, they were bad at fitting inside small electrical conduits.
It's no good. My arm's too big.
He looked at Pikka. 15 seconds now, maybe.
Give it to me.
She said.
Tell me what to do.
He didn't argue. Instead, he just handed her the spanner.
You'll need to do this by feel.
Joss said, as his wife knelt and reached her arm into the opening.
But don't touch the conduit walls. You could absorb the charge and electrocute yourself.
Pikka gave him a frustrated look.
Joss? I don't know what I'm doing here at all. I'm the systems specialist. You're the mechanic.
Her voice was as steady as it always was. Anyone but her husband would think Pikka Adren didn't have an ounce of fear in her body. But he knew her better than anyone. She was worried. Very worried. He put his hand on her arm.
I'll guide you. I will be able to feel it when you get to the right spot.
Pikka reached slowly forward into the conduit. Then, suddenly, he felt the slightest impact, transmitted along her arm to his fingertips. She had found the hub.
Okay,
He said,
there's a little nub at the end of the spanner. Lock onto it, then a twist to the right. Quick and short. Turn it for this long. No more, no less.
He increased the pressure with his index finger for a second and a half, then pulled it away.
Do you get it?
Yeah.
She said. Joss hoped so, and if it didn't work, well, he was touching her. If the built-up energy discharged into her body, they would go together. But they didn't. The corridor felt suddenly still, serene. A sense of a vanished vibration, too subtle to hear until it was no longer there.
I think I got it.
Pikka said.
Yes. We're still alive.
Joss answered.
And the lights are still on. Both are good signs.
Pikka carefully pulled her arm from the conduit. Joss bent to look, and yes, the problem was solved. He looked at his wife.
If we had headed to the hangar like we planned. If you hadn't run that last scan of the station systems.
I know.
Pikka said. She leaned forward and kissed him. A nice hit on his lips. Not too long, and not too short.
You're a very lucky man.
Smiling, she snapped her fingers.
Come on.
She said.
We have a ship to catch.
The Third Horizon was an elegant vessel, an emissary-class cruiser, shining and bright. The epitome of Republic ship design, speeding through hyperspace on its way back to Coruscant. Definitely not the worst ride the Adrens had ever taken. Pikka was sitting in the hangar bay, finishing an incident report for Shai Tennem about the wiring issue on Starlight Beacon. She sent it off, then looked up at Joss across the hangar, admiring one of the new long beams that were part of the Third Horizon's complement of support vessels. Long, sleek, and thin, the long beams could serve as passenger or cargo ships, rescue vessels, or even mid-sized combat craft. Joss was deep in conversation with a member of the deck crew, a blue-skinned Twi'lek. Joss laughed heartily and slapped the man on the shoulder. Pikka smiled. Joss could make friends anywhere. A siren sounded, and a voice came across the ship's intercom system. Focused and steady. She looked up, listening.
This is Admiral Kronara. We have received a distress signal from the Etzel system, regarding a system-wide mass casualty event. We are close enough to divert to offer assistance. Any passengers with piloting, rescue, or emergency medical experience, willing to aid in the relief effort, please make yourselves known to a crew member.
The intercom fell silent, and Pikka felt the slight tremor as the Third Horizon dropped out of hyperspace. She had no idea what a system-wide mass casualty event could even be. The Republic was at peace, after all. A supernova, maybe? What else could possibly have happened? The important thing was that system-wide certainly meant billions of lives. There was just no other way to interpret it. She sensed the telltale presence, turned her head, and there was Joss. He said,
We have to see if we can help.
Pikka didn't even try to dissuade him. They could both fly a ship, and they had all sorts of training that could be useful in a crisis. She just nodded.
I love you.
She said,
Let's go.
This book was developed 100% using artificial intelligence to generate realistic and familiar voices,